from the top. You ready?
All right, I'm ready. Welcome back, all. Thank you for being patient with us. Good evening, and welcome to the Ohio Environmental Council's first installment of The Art of Change, a new event series to bring together artists and change makers to address some of Ohio's greatest challenges. My name is Callia Tellez. I am the Environmental Policy Fellow here at the OEC. The mission of the OEC is to secure healthy air, land, and water for all who call Ohio home. Our policy experts use legislative initiatives, legal action, and scientific principles to push for change in state houses and city halls across Ohio every day. To work towards a just and representative environmental movement, our work must center the lived experiences of those most affected by environmental hazards. So tonight, we're defining environmentalism as a movement fueled by the power of storytelling and artistic expression. What can we learn from each other? The intersection of our identities and craft as we fight for a healthier environment, safe communities, and a just future. Tonight, we'll enjoy performances from two incredible artists, and afterwards we'll sit down and have a conversation about art and the environment and social justice. It is my pleasure to introduce our first artist who believes in the transformative power of art and considers poetry her ministry. Barbara Fant has been writing and performing for 14 years. She has represented Columbus in 9 national poetry competitions. Her first poetry collection, Paint, Inside Out, was published by Penmanship Books in 2010 when she was awarded the Cora Craig Award for Young Authors. She is the author of several chapbooks, the co-author of 2 stage productions, and has been commissioned by over 10 national organizations. Her work has been featured by Button Poetry, Deaf Poetry Jam, the Academy of American Poets, and many more publications. Installations of her work can be found in the Columbus Museum of Art, the Columbus Foundation, and Crimson Cup in Easton Town Center. Barbara has received residencies from California to Cuba. She holds an MFA from Antioch University, Los Angeles, and a Master of Theology from the Methodist Theological School in Ohio. The founder of Bloom Barb Fant LLC, she teaches poetry in correctional institutions and schools. Currently, she is the artistic director for the Harmony Project, the training and replication manager for Arts for Healing and Justice Network, a teaching artist at Transit Arts, and co-curator of the reading series Paging Columbus. Please join me in welcoming Barbara to the stage.
So good to be with everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to Ohio Environmental Council, my goodness, for just making this happen and putting this together. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm going to read a piece tonight called Continue to Breathe. I was commissioned by the Ohio Environmental Council in 2018 for their annual gala to write a poem about the white oak. And so this is that piece. I tried to interweave my own personal story into this piece, and just honored to be here. Thank you so much for doing this important work. They call you tree of life, how you pump air back into the earth like blood, as if you be heartbeat, organ of this universe, great white oak, how for 600 generations kept life harvested in your bosom, the creatures of our land, the birds of the sky that built nest in your branches. Native Americans made bread from your breath to feed entire civilizations, made healing balm from your bones, and yet you are being ripped from your roots, stripped of purpose and burned of the air you extend. My grandfather was the white oak in our family, traveled to work in a steel mill from Mississippi to Youngstown, Ohio, the land of steel mills, Steel Mill City, how this city was built on the backs of steel. How every steel mill closure crushed the backbone of a new worker, and the smokestacks coughed up black ash, and the whole city turned to dust. Everyone became fossil, a skeleton of what used to be. Everyone's spine became an empty railroad track. Every hope got lost in the smog, and a new family got swallowed by all the smoke. When Black Monday brought winter to everyone's doorstep, cancer grew like a wildfire in my family. Prostate to breast to lung, my grandfather to grandmother. My father began working in a factory at 17 before graduating from high school and lost his brain in all the dust. My mother died when I was 15, and the bones in her body held me when her bosom became phantom. And now there is a great white oak in my chest. Its branches exhale from my bones and show me the earth through another lens. Today, I am the white oak in my family. The wind blew, but I'm still standing. A living testament of my bloodline survival. Overcomer, conquer, flow through this vessel like a river. If you could see the life harnessed in this haven, my throat would be the brightest branch you've ever burned. When they claim to set me on fire, I show them how I make the earth exhale with all this green that grows. They call me foundation. How the air we breathe is a direct connection to our bodies. The water becomes dirty flood in our mouths, and we all wake up wondering what happened to our children. I want to believe in a land where my children can breathe clean air, and clean water is a right, not a privilege. This is how we take our land back, by raising our voices and together making a change, for fighting for life, remembering that together we can heal this world with the power of our own throats and hands. Together we stand. This is how the earth loves us back. For years, how life extended through this earth's branches, how this life extended through the oak's branches, how it wrapped its limbs around this world and reminded us we can breathe, how we can wrap our arms around this calling to help the rest of the earth continue to breathe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for that powerful story. Our next artist is Eric Rollin. Eric is a professional singer-songwriter, educator, mentor, and audio engineer. He is a native of the greater Columbus area and graduate of Gahanna-Lincoln High School. Not only is Eric the founder of the Columbus Chicken and Beer Festival, but he is also co-founder and singer-songwriter for the national band Mr. Anderson, and founder of the local music initiative, The Break, the longest running freestyle hip hop open mic night in Columbus. He's also a member and advocate of various nonprofit organizations dedicated to community music development. Eric currently serves as a songwriting instructor at Franklinton High School. For the past 16 years, he has been writing music professionally and empowering youth by encouraging the use of positive and creative outward expression as a tool to increase socialization skills, academic success, and overcome behavioral and emotional challenges. His passion for improving community by inspiring individual works of freedom make him a great leader and role model for today's youth. Tonight, Eric is joined by David Wong on violin.
One, two. I love this mic stand. Hello, everyone. I am Eric Rollin. This is David Wong. We are going to play some music for you. know this girl, she has a job. She goes to it every day, and she likes it cause it's calm. She told her mom the other day it was the bomb. Her mom is proud of her cause now she's living on her own. Yeah, at this job, she takes calls, hello, she takes calls, and everybody loves her tone. And in between the calls, her mind starts to roam, her head starts to hurt, and there's aches all in her bones. Then one day she woke up and she had a bloody nose. Maybe something that she ate the night before, nobody knows. She was confused, nauseated, and it shows. Some will say, yo, that's just life and how it goes. So she goes to work without the shadow of a doubt. Notices the taste of metal is always in her mouth. The same taste of metal that she noticed from her nose. When blood started to leak, things were bleak, but now it shows. So then she goes to a supervisor, thinking that they run things, so they're probably much wiser. She says, things may be a little out of sort. My eyes are irritated and my body's really sore. My head really hurts and there's this taste in my mouth. I feel like I'm a yak, this is something I can't ignore. The supervisor says you're not the only one, there's more. Only thing to do is fill out the incident report. So she does. Shoulder shrugs, talks to her mother, and her mother says she loves her. Don't worry, honey, we'll figure this out. She said, don't worry, honey, we'll figure this out. So they took time to figure out what it's about. A couple months later, she was finally moving out of, the building that made her well. Told her she could work from home for a spell if that would help, Turns out the reason people suffered right across the street from the building was a presence. Airborne toxins that were causing the problems. Texas tea, refinery, white and eye shot. Look out the window, you could see, but in land of the free, but that this land there's a fee. Sulfur dioxide, hydrogen chloride, hydrogen sulfide, too much and you might die. These fumes were leaking into the vents of the building surrounding it, and they getting rich. As time passes in a flinch, you won't believe what they asked her after this. Sad story, you need to get mad for me. Told her to report back to the building, it's mandatory. I know this girl, she had a job, she went to it every day, and she thought it was the bomb. She had asthma, so she even asked her mom. Her mom told her to quit because her life was on the line. Wish I could get the right person on the line and let them know that this is bad for yours and mine, and let them know that this is always on my mind. If this the cost that it takes to make the cake, it's called a crime. Just like the weather, these things should change for the better. The people that have to work for a living deserve better. If I had the power, I'd stop it and show them currency, cause currents to their eye sockets. If you had the power, would you stop it in the name of Mother Earth or in the name of a prophet? If we had the power, we could stop it. What we do, if we do something, who's gonna stop us? If we had the power, we could stop it. Wait, we all do something, who's gonna stop us? We all do something, who's gonna stop us? I wanna know. We all do something, who's gonna stop us? I wanna know. We all do something, who's gonna stop us? If we all do something, who's gonna stop us? Thank you.
Barbara, if you'll come up to the stage as well. Wow, I'm so moved by both your performances. Thank you so much for sharing your art tonight. We are pleased to support our artists this evening. So if you would like to join us, please make a donation to $Bloom127 and $Eric Rollin on Cash App. spoken word and music, I mean, they're such powerful tools, forms of storytelling. And I want to discuss how your art is a tool to advocate for environmental justice. But first, we should get on the same page and talk about what environmental justice is. So the basis of environmental justice is the understanding that the impacts of pollution and the effects of climate change are not felt equally across all communities. Black, Indigenous, people of color are disproportionately subjected to environmental issues. And furthermore, your access to a healthy environment is deeply tied to systemic racial inequities, to rural poverty, housing access, immigration status, disability injustice. So to me, environmental justice means centering environmental advocacy at the intersection of these things. So the first question I want to ask you all tonight, can you share a little more about the story behind the pieces you performed tonight?
Sure, would love to. I'll go first. Yeah, my piece was really about the white oak, and I used that story to kind of talk about my own personal journey and my family's journey from the South to Youngstown, Ohio, to really work in the steel mills. At that time, there weren't lots of jobs. Of course, we know about the Great Migration and lots of Black Americans floating from the South to the North for better opportunities. And my family was a part of that. And so I really wanted to demonstrate the idea of what the steel mills, like the fact that we had jobs, which was a great thing, but then what the steel mills in turn ended up doing to our families, and how there was this generational issue, in this process that happened. And so I talk about the smokestacks, there's imagery around that, and how so many people in my family ended up getting cancer. Not only suffering from mental illness because of like the trauma of the situation, but also cancer, like physical impacts on our actual bodies and being able to breathe clean air. And so I think that I really wanted to demonstrate that in my piece. My mother also, she passed from breast cancer, my grandfather from prostate cancer. So I don't think we often take times to kind of think about the air we breathe and the specific impacts on the air that we breathe and how it's impacting our body. And so that's what I really wanted to demonstrate in that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, sometimes we forget when talking about the environment that our bodies are also the environment.
Yes.
So that,
yes.
Yeah. How about you, Eric?
Well, that particular piece was about my sister. I wrote a piece about my sister because she used to work at a building that was across the street from an oil refinery near the airport. And there were toxic fumes that were leaking into the building. And so she had to, at first they had her, go home and work from home or whatnot. And then they had her come back to the building. And then after that, she was like, look, I can't work here. Like, this is, she has asthma. She was having nosebleeds. And she wasn't the only one. Like, this was like a class action lawsuit or something like that. So when I was commissioned to do this piece, that was the first thing that popped in my head was, environment playing a direct role in, my family and, people I care about. So I sat her down. She basically walked me through the whole experience. And then I wrote a song about it. Yeah. And then I asked David to help me. He accompanied me, and he made it happen. So that's how it all came about.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So how did you arrive at telling your story through spoken word and through music?
That's interesting. I love music. I've always written music. I've been writing since I was 17 years old. So even before this, all the music I had written wasn't as direct as this particular piece. Even when I did the piece, myself, I was, discovering more about myself, you know what I mean? So I guess how I came to answer your question, how I came to do that, I guess it's just something that I've always done. I've always tried to put my thoughts and feelings and emotions into words and, and I'm an MC, so, you know, I like to hear the beat and, you know, I go in. So that's how, yeah.
Yeah, you an MC, you a fire MC, okay. Yeah, I grew up writing. I always loved to write. It was like a natural language for me. When my mother passed, I felt like, you know, I need to go to counseling. My dad was like, no, you going to church. You know what I mean? And that was his way of like handling things, you know? So I would take notes about what the pastor was saying, and I would go back home and write them into a poem. And that was like my way of processing. And so it became this way of like prayer for me. It became a way of communication for me and just like processing my grief. And so from that point on, like I just knew I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to have a voice in this world. And I saw this poet named Sunny Patterson on HBO Def Poetry. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know what the heck she just did, but I want to do what she did for the rest of my life. And so when I got to Columbus, I found an open mic space and I haven't left the stage since.
Wow, that's wonderful. You know, you both touched on this next question actually, and it's this theme that connects both of your stories, both of your pieces. And, you know, I hear how deeply family and community motivates your work and your call to action. And in a way, that connects my story to the environmental movement also. You know, my father immigrated from Nicaragua, and he came to the US for the opportunity for education, to study, to become a doctor and help underserved communities. And it's my connection to my family in Nicaragua that motivates me to do this work, because, you know, my family is already facing the impacts of climate change. You know, we know that from the 2 Category 4 hurricanes that came back to back last year. And now we're seeing climate refugees from Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador, and they're coming in to try and, you know, afford their families that better life. So, you know, I have to take that immense privilege that my father provided for me and ensure that there is a space for these communities in the environmental movement. So what are the different ways? You've already touched on this a little bit, but can you elaborate a little bit more on you know, how that connection to your family and your community appear in your work as artists?
Well, it's all up and through my work. You know, I think I started writing from the perspective of being able to process what I was experiencing, and my family is a part of that story and that journey. And now I think I write from a place of still my own personal healing, but I think I write for the healing of other people as well. And the people that don't have voices, right? There's so many people that are in the community that I was birthed in that don't have a voice. There's so many people who are in this community that we live in right now that don't have a voice. And then there are people that are part of our community, you know, globally, right? And I think I write for those people, especially Black women, you know, and so a lot of my work right now is specifically speaking to and about and for Black women, and the women in my family.
Yeah, so just, you know, if you want to share any more about how family and community appears in your work, you know.
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, I guess, well, when I was, my mom told me a story when I was young, actually when I was in her womb. She told me that she was at a some type of a dance competition or something, and she said when she was there, I started like moving around and things like that, you know, in her room or whatever. And so I feel like environment plays a direct role in your experience even before we get here. You know what I mean? And then when I was 17, I had a dream that I had wrote a rap. And when I woke up, I remembered all the words.
Wow.
So I went to my mom's computer and or a little Acer computer, you know what I'm saying? And I recorded it, you know, and I still have it. Y'all never gonna hear it, but I still have it to this day. But I guess I feel like, gosh, I don't know if I answered your question, but I feel like environment does play a direct role in your reality and your experience, and family is a big part of that.
Yeah.
Family is a big part of your environment, and I think that's one of the reasons why I do what I do, you know.
Yeah.
And then on one of the new songs off a new record that I'm doing right now, I wrote a song about how to build a fire, you know what I mean? Because I feel like my voice is, you know, to speak to the youth and the people that I impact, you know, because I teach, you know, a lot of youth. So I felt like one of the things that, you know, a lot of youth don't know how to do is build a fire. So I decided to write a song about building a fire. So that way, if they're put in a position where they need one, you know, hopefully they remember that song.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right,
So.
right. Yeah, I mean, you know, tonight's all about redefining environmentalism. And, you know, we touched on the point earlier where, you know, your body is also the environment, but I'm really glad that you brought up that your family is also your environment, you know, because like when so many people think of environmentalism, they do think about the science, the, you know, pollution and algae blooms and policy. But the importance of having these conversations about, no, it's the intersection of so many different things, of so many social issues that have been left out of the narrative, you know, for so long, and social issues that affect people that have been left out of the narrative for so long. So yeah, thank you both for sharing that. And, you know, you both are amazing change makers, you know, with what you do. And so could you share a specific example that illustrates how you've created change through your art forms?
You want to take this one first?
What's the question? One more time.
Okay. Give us an example that illustrates how you've created change through your art.
Wow. I would have to say it's through the youth that I teach. I mean, I feel like, you know, about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, a good friend of mine, Mr. Shaw, Jim Shaw, called me and said that he needed someone to help teach the youth about hip hop. And that's not something that he did. So I got pulled into that arena, you know, being around youth and teaching them about music. And I love it. I don't think there's anything better. I mean, it's, I love watching students that I've worked with get on stage and do their thing almost as much or more than I like doing it myself. You know what I mean? Yeah. And yeah, I think that's just something, I think that's how I'm doing that, I guess you could say, you know, is just working with the youth and trying to help them understand how much potential and power they have with their vibrations and frequencies when they say things and when they decide to act on their thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this is truly an intergenerational movement in many ways, you know, because as you're sharing, you can, I don't know, share that power of change through generations. But in talking about the environmental movement, a huge aspect of it is, you know, the passing down of intergenerational trauma, you know, whether it's like sickness, mental health. And so, you know, there are two sides of that. And I guess we need to ask ourselves the question of what do we want to pass down? You know, do we want to keep on passing down the trauma to the future generations, or do we want to be the ones who, you know, work for change now and then inspire future generations to continue what we're doing and then, you know, take it to far better places than we could ever dream of? I mean, a couple weeks ago, I got asked to speak to some fourth graders up in Cleveland about global warming. And I mean, I don't think I even knew what global warming was when I was in fourth grade. Like maybe,
I definitely did.
Maybe I had like, you know, heard my parents talk about it, but I think when I was growing up, we were very sheltered from that conversation because it was like, I don't know. But yeah, to see kids now already so eager to learn about it and to change it is really inspiring. Yeah. So that took us on a bit of a tangent, but could you share an example of the change you've created through art?
Yeah, well, I strive to make change through art. You know, I hope I'm making some change through art. But I was going to go the teaching route too. I've been teaching in juvenile incarceration spaces for many, many years, really since I was maybe 19. I've been teaching in those spaces and adult facilities as well. And so I think one of the things that I love to do is just provide people with tools to be able to tell their own stories. I believe we all have these stories. I always tell people I went from like punching in walls to picking up pens. Like that's exactly like my story. I was angry, you know what I mean? And all I needed was a tool. I needed somebody to hand me a tool to be able to help me heal and get my story out. And that's what I tell the young people. Here's a tool, you know, and if you can get this out of you, you don't have to carry it around anymore. you know, you get it out of your body. And that's part of the healing process. And so that's the change that I hope I'm making, is I don't want to see these young people incarcerated. You know, I want to keep going until we don't have these incarceration spaces. We don't need them. Okay. And juveniles, young people should not be incarcerated. And so I think that's the change that I really push for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up just that aspect of sharing stories, because I know one thing that I'd like to redefine about environmentalism is this concept that we have to speak for other people. You know, like that's like, I don't want to speak for anybody, because communities that have been marginalized can speak for themselves. You know, they have a voice. Absolutely. They just have not been given the microphone by the people who have the microphone. That's right. And so I think that's such an important thing to understand moving forward, is, you know, not who's left out of your conversation, but who's left out that could be contributing themselves to the conversation. So thank you for sharing that. And there's environmental elements to both your stories. And when we were, you know, talking about this a couple weeks ago, preparing for this event, we asked the question, do you consider yourself environmentalists? And that brought up a really interesting conversation, you know, of what even is an environmentalist? Like, how do you define environmentalist? And I know you asked me like, well, what is an environmentalist? And I was like, I don't know, you know, I guess it's something I am, but I don't know how to define it. You know, how do we define that? And I want to call out the fact that today's mainstream environmental movement is built on early environmentalists. I use air quotes, environmentalists like John Muir and Aldo Leopold. And these environmentalists, they contributed to the forced removal and erasure of indigenous peoples. You know, we think of, you know, Yosemite National Park, but we don't talk about the Yosemite Valley people who were murdered and removed to make that a national park. And they also supported concepts like eugenics and overall just sought to preserve land for only those who had the access to enjoy it, to be in it. Right. So I feel, to call myself an environmentalist today, I need to actively resist and dismantle the systems put in place and perpetuated by the original and modern environmental movement, you know? And so as we talk about redefining environmentalism, I think to do that, we have to imagine this future where environmental justice is realized. So could you tell me, you know, something like what does that future look like to you? Any aspect of it? I'd just love to hear your thoughts on the future.
Yeah, no, this is great. I mean, I'm loving it. And when you were talking, what I was thinking about is the trauma of the land and how we don't often take that into consideration, like when we're thinking about environment and how that impacts, but just like the trauma of the actual land and the blood that exists, you know what I mean? That blood that has been shed on this actual land, right? We don't take that into consideration. But I think that when I'm thinking about a world that is true and healed and free, that's what I would love to see. That's like my vision. I've been really toying with this idea of just being an abolitionist when it comes to like this prison space specifically. And I just watched this, it was like a media feature through Performing Statistics where they talked about no kids in prison. And so when I think about that, you know, I think that we all are not only environmentalists, but abolitionists in that space where we are, you know, advocating for the freedom of people. And that's something that I want to see. I want to see people freed. I want to see people healed. I want to see people whole. And in order to do that, there's so many other things, including the environment that we have to, that has to come into play.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I feel like, you know, in order to treat our environment properly or correctly, or so that way, you know, people get those things, I think it's important to focus on our own environments, our own terrain. And I think a lot of, you know, focus is put on other things besides focusing on ourselves and healing ourselves and our capacity to heal ourselves through our terrain and making sure that we take care of ourselves. So I think if that happens, then improving the environment around us is going to become a lot more clear, or the solution will become a lot more clear than it is now for the future. That's just my opinion. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, I think about the role of environmentalists to be advocates for people as much as they are for our physical environment. And, you know, I've had the conversation in the past of, you know, we have to keep doing what we're doing to ensure that, you know, everybody on this earth even has a future.
Yeah.
But a point that I want to bring to that is, if we just stay in our environmental natural sciences wheelhouse as it has long been, then who are we creating that future for? Right. You know, because if we continue, you know, not doing the work in society and continue perpetuating the fact that Black and brown bodies are harmed at a disproportional rate, then, well, then who are we creating a future for? Who are we protecting from the effects of climate change? Because there are people who aren't going to live to see the future that we're building. And so, you know, it is our role to care about people, you know, to care about our immediate environments, just as much as we're imagining this future, imagining, you know, what our environment could be.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on, you know, one of your role models earlier, but can you share more about a role model or inspirations who have created social change through art?
Ooh, yes, social change through art. I mean, well, immediately I think Baldwin, you know, immediate. I mean, that's like first off the top of mind, right? James Baldwin. But then I think of Sonny Patterson. I think of I love these New Orleans artists, y'all. But Sonny Patterson is one of them. This incredible poet out of New Orleans, who I discovered her post-Katrina. So her poems kind of blew up post-Katrina, but she was talking about the land, right? And talking about the people of the land. There's also an artist in New Orleans, Brandon Mike Odom, who runs Studio B, which he took over this abandoned warehouse after Katrina. And there are like these wall-sized paintings in there. And he gave artists a space to create and made something beautiful out of what wasn't, right? And it's powerful and overwhelming to see. So when I see the work that he's doing and the work that he's doing in his city, but then in other cities as well, it's just incredible and it's powerful. So I could go on and list out poets. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say Sonny Patterson, I'm going to say Mahogany Brown, and then I'm going to keep it going. I'm going to toss it to you.
Oh, man. Well, I definitely find inspiration in all the people said, but I would say I find a lot of inspiration in the youth that I teach. They never cease to amaze me when it comes to what becomes the songwriting and poetry and things like that. So I think those are the future Baldwins and, you know, all this. So for me, that is what inspires me to be better at what I do. You know what I mean? Is what they do. And when I see that what I'm doing, you know, is having a positive impact on them, and then they do it, then that it's like, you know, we're sharpening each other, you know, for me, you know, I think it's the youth.
Yeah, absolutely. I also feel a lot of that inspiration, you know, not just from youth, but from mentors, you know, in this scene. Yeah, so it looks like we have a question from the audience. Okay. So this says, making change is hard work, but there are moments of beauty and inspiration. Can you share a specific story of beauty or inspiration? Do those keep you going?
Yes, they do. They do keep me going. Oh gosh. I'd say recently, one of the most recent things that pops into my head, one of my students wrote a song about the Willie Lynch letter and Willie Lynch and those kinds of things. So for me, that is the most recent, like most beautiful thing that I have seen lately. That is going to definitely affect the youth, you know, around her and other youth that end up hearing it or whatnot. So for me, that's the most recent. That's the most recent that I know of right now.
Wow.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What came to my mind, I'll just say it, because sometimes you know how you like something comes to your mind, you like, you shouldn't say that, and then you just keep on going with the other thought. But I'm gonna actually say what first came to my mind. And I have a mentor who is 85 years old, and he's like a legend in the city of Columbus, but he was ill for a while. And when we were trying to nurse him back to health, we came in there and read poems to him. And after a while, after a few days, he started sitting back up. He started eating. He started reciting poems to the nurses. And they were like, what in the world, you know, what is happening? But I love that. And now, I mean, he's healthy, he's well, he's doing so much better now. But I just think about how what was inside him changed and shifted the environment around him. It changed what was in him, but then it also shifted what was around him.
That's
and so,
beautiful.
So that's what came to top of mind for me.
That's so beautiful. I love what you just said about, you know, what's inside of us can change what's outside of us, you know, can change our outside environment. Yeah, that was fantastic. You know, another thing that I want to touch on, it's this idea, you know, we keep using the word intersection, you know, the intersection of social justice, environmental justice, the intersection of art and environmental justice. And so I want to, you know, bring attention to Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality. Yeah. You know, and what she says about the importance of understanding that the way we walk through the world and the way that we, you know, face marginalization, it compounds with the intersections of our identities. And I find that's an incredibly important topic to center environmentalism on, you know, as we talk about, you know, environmentalism is so multifaceted, and we can think of all the overwhelming options of topics to explore within environmentalism, but we need to center it at the intersection of the identities that matter, you know, that are facing the worst impacts of climate change, of pollution. So I was just curious if either of you had any thoughts about, you know, the intersection of your identities and how that shows through your art.
You got some good questions.
She
over here with the
questions. Good. Do you want to answer? I mean, it's your turn. I'll start. Okay, I'll start. Yeah, I think about intersection all the time. You know, especially in my work as a writer. You know, I'm a woman, but I'm not just a woman. I'm a Black woman, right? When you see me, you see Black first. You know what I mean? And so that's a huge part, I think, of my life and my voice. But I'm also a believer, right? I'm a person of faith, right? But I'm also an artist. I'm a creative. You know what I mean? Like, so I think about intersection all the time when it comes to my work, and I think I'm intentional about that intersectionality too, and about how it speaks and can move other people around me. So I think intersectionality, when we think about it, it gives us this opportunity to have a unique story. We're ostracized for all these things, right? But then that's actually what makes us who we are. And it gives us the opportunity to speak directly to things that other people cannot. And so I look at it as an obligation and a duty. So
beautiful.
I guess I kind of feel the same way. I mean, she kind of hit the nail on the head there. I don't know really what else to add to that. You know, I noticed even when I was young, especially when I became a teenager, I noticed one of the things, even when I was at home, like if I would walk into a room, people get scared because I was tall, you know what I mean? And then as I got bigger, you know, you know, I cannot tell you how many times I've walked into a room and somebody be like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I just feel like it is an obligation, you know, like it's important for us to express, you know, how we feel about those situations.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. You know, I think an aspect of my identity that really is, you know, at the front and center of a lot of my work is just, you know, being a first generation American, you know, with my dad, as mentioned, like coming from Nicaragua. And there's this sort of phenomenon among, you know, American Latine people, and that's, you're kind of like too American, too white to really identify with, you know, the country that your parents came from. But then also you don't totally feel like you are American, you know, in a way. And it's sort of that plays through in this sort of like slight disconnect I have with land, you know, because my heritage, you know, my land for my heritage would be Nicaragua on my dad's side, Ireland on my mom's side. But, you know, I'm the only one in my family who was born and raised in Ohio. Wow, so it's like, so is Ohio my home? And in a way, I think because I grew up without like a real like grounding, like this is my identity, this is where I belong, this is my country. You know, I never really felt that like, this is my country. It made me have this sort of removed respect for the land, you know, because I wasn't attached to a specific place. And so I feel like I've sort of adopted, you know, other places that mean so much to me, but they're not part of my identity. They're not part of my heritage, you know? So I care deeply about Appalachia, for example. You know, I go to West Virginia like almost every weekend to rock climb and hike, but, you know, I could never act as if Appalachia was part of my story, you know? And so I just, you know, think about how that is an aspect of, you know, identity that comes forward in environmentalism.
No, that's powerful. I mean, how dope is it though too to not feel that you have this specific connection to the land, but to do the work that you do, right? You're so connected to the land, right? You know, right? Like you care for it in a way that, like, where you're actually educating us on how to care for the land in a way that we should too. So you have a deep, your generation came forward and you have a spiritual connection with the land in a way, which is probably why you're connected to Appalachia, right? In the way that you are. It's so much deeper than just the surface.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, we've talked a lot about inspiration from young people today. And, you know, I feel like as a young person still, I get so much inspiration from my peers. I think, you know, one of the young people that have shaped me the most is this cohort of scholars. So I got this Udall scholarship when I was in college. And so I got to join together with several students from across the nation, half of which represented and came from Indigenous nations. And, you know, growing up in Ohio, we don't have any federally or state recognized tribes. And that wasn't anything taught in my school, like as many things are not taught, you know, in our schools. And so, wow, being in that room with these students and hearing their stories and their passions and just seeing their fight and their connection to their land and their community, it was so inspiring. But again, bringing it back to redefining environmentalism, I feel like we're kind of like coming up with like, what are some key things to remember moving forward as we try and recreate this movement? And I want to share something that a friend of mine from this group told me, and that's a lot of times when you're in spaces and you're collaborating with people who you do not share their identity, you know, they have a different story than you, they represent a different community than you. Listen first and speak third, you know? And I think that's something that I really try and keep centered to my work. And I know that's extremely important, particularly for white environmental organizations that have been the leaders for so long, to remember that, you know, oftentimes it is our role as an environmental organization to listen first, speak third, and to bring others' identities to the stage to share their story.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that that people have stories, they have voices, they just haven't been given the microphone, right? You know, so they have voices. Exactly. I mean, I think it came full circle, and I think that people know what they need, right? And sometimes I think I'm gonna say we as Americans, right? You know what I mean? People just rush in and try to give people what they need when people know what they need, right? Yeah. Or we need to go in and ask, what is it?
Just need to ask, right?
Right, you know. So they're the author of their own stories. They know their stories way better than we do.
Yes, I love that. I want to call out a comment in the chat. This is coming from Robert. So the arts can create connections, bridges to connect for inclusion, a welcoming invitation to action. That sounds like poetry.
That's real poetic right there. I don't know who you are, but
I want to read that again, actually. The arts can create connections, bridges to connect for inclusion, welcoming invitation to action.
Speak.
Yeah,
I love that. Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for joining this conversation.
Thank you for having us. This is so cool.
And thank all of you at home for joining tonight's event. Special thanks to Class Acts Entertainment for hosting us this evening, as well as your amazing performances. You have a new collection of poetry coming out. It'll be released on Sundress Publications in fall of 2021.
Indeed. Yes, thank you.
And you, Eric, you have a single H&M coming out June 4th with Mr. Anderson, that group.
Yes,
and you're also playing a show with that student that you told me about.
Ty Khalil, yes.
Yeah, who's playing on NPR tomorrow at 2:30. And this will be, this performance will be Friday, July 9th at Land Grant for Franklinton Fridays. And we will be back with our next installation of The Art of Change in July. So until then, we'll continue to share opportunities with you to make change for the benefit of our environment. I know I've been deeply inspired by your performances and these conversations tonight. If you are also inspired at home, we encourage you to help support us as we try and reimagine environmentalism, make the environmental movement more inclusive, and visit we have a QR code for a donation, or you could visit us at theoec.org. So thank you so much.
We thank you.
Yes,
I feel like we've learned so much from you, and you made this conversation just so genuine and just, personable. So thank you so much for hosting. This has been lovely. Thank you.
Best interview I've ever had.